Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to the Finding You podcast. I am Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Tuesday, July 22nd, 2025. Tonight, I'm going to be discussing perhaps one of the most common, if not the most common, question that I get asked by parents who have children in treatment. The idea of dealing with a child's perpetual chronic resentment about having been sent away to treatment or being required to go to therapeutic services or treatment. I think for tonight, I want to keep it as open as possible. I want to relax into this idea because I think there's so much nuance, so much paradox, so much that's really hard to pin down into one simple answer. So we'll explore that together as I go along. Before I get into that, let me talk about the housekeeping items. My two books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are available on Amazon and Audible. If you are interested in participating in a Finding You workshop, if you've been waiting for an opportunity to work with me, my last Finding You of 2025 will be this August 13th through 17th. So there's a couple of spots there available. If you're interested in attending the workshop with me, that is your offering. September 3rd, October 1st, November 5th. There are several all listed on our website throughout the year. August is the last one that I'll be running. If you're interested in a coach or a therapist who works in the model that I teach and talk about here, you can go to our website or email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. All inquiries, suggestions, questions for the podcast, for my Ask Me Anything episodes, and also for private intensives, for couples, for families. If you have any inquiries about that, go to our website or email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. I'm very pleased that this fall, October 12th through 17th, I will be running an Audacity to Be You 5-day workshop in Rhinebeck, New York at the Omega Institute. This is a beautiful setting in along the Hudson River. If you're interested in this, go to the Omega website, the Omega website, which is eomega.org. That's eomega.org. Click on the workshops and then the Audacity to Be You. It's only around $500 for a 5-day workshop, so an incredible value. And even if you've been a participant of one of our intensives, this is going to be something quite different. Also, my daughter Emma will be there accompanying me and assisting me in the work. If you're interested in continuing to have live access to these broadcasts as I record them, or you want to support the podcast or get a couple of extra episodes per month that I won't be releasing to the public, you are invited to enter to our Finding You Inner Circle. This is a subscription and a support of the Finding You podcast. Like I said, all current Finding You participants and alumni of our Finding You programs will be automatically enrolled in the program. Go to our website or email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. So let's get into it tonight. I want to start off with a quote that my daughter Emma came up with a couple of years back. She wrote, "One of the most loving things a parent can do is be willing to be cast as the villain in their child's story." So when we think about our children resenting us, this idea of being able to be bigger than, larger than, capable of holding a child's resentment, anger, sadness, grief, hurt is a part of that task. It's a part of that ask in this process. That we allow our children. I was teaching somebody this today, and I talk about it often, that if you need to be good, that's an ego drive. If you need to be good, you'll end up hurting the people around you. Everybody that you love and care about will be hurt by that need. And what I mean by that is if one needs to be good, and I will confess that I spent the first 40 years with this as my primary goal of being good. And of course, it makes sense. Who would fault me for thinking that to try to be a good father, good friend, good boss, good therapist, good husband would be something that would lead me astray. But here's what happens. If I need to be good, then when you get upset with me, whether you be my child, my wife, my friend, my coworker, my neighbor, if I need to be good, then your anger, your upset, your hurt, your critique of my behavior will be met with a defense. I will need to make you the problem. I will say things like, "You just don't understand my intentions. Let me tell you what I was really trying to do or what I really did. It's your depression, your anxiety, your thinking errors that are causing you to believe that I did something wrong or that I'm bad in any way." And of course, I must believe this. Because if I'm good, the threat of being not good is too great, that I will need to make you the problem. So part of growing up, part of maturing as a parent, and what our children's behavior and struggles often ask us to consider, to look at, to confront, is the unhealed parts of ourselves, the parts that we haven't dealt with, the parts that we haven't come to terms with. And because most all of us were raised by parents who also thought it was the goal of life, the objective of life, to be good, we erase the idea that we can be human, that we can make mistakes. It's too heavy of an emotional burden. The reason I often say that I go to psychotherapy and deal with what I like to affectionately refer to as my horrible, rotten self, that is who I am. The reason I do that is to show love toward my family and toward my clients, toward the people that I care about and that I serve professionally. I go to this place where I confess essentially who I am. And because my therapist is capable of being larger, she is bigger than me in a psychological sense, and is capable of holding those feelings, she reflects back a sense of compassion, a sense of understanding. And over time, I internalize that feeling inside of myself. Her thoughts and feelings become my new inner voice, overriding the old programming. So that the task is not to become good anymore, but the task is to become who I am, to accept who I am. And the development of self-love and self-compassion. You know, when I talk about the work, and I'm going to say this many times tonight, when I talk about the work, what is the work? The work is self-compassion, self-love, essentially. If I narrow it down to the simplest idea, it is self-love and compassion. Because if you have that for yourself, that naturally extends to everybody else, because everybody else is more like you than they are different. In fact, our anger, our disgust, our judgments of others are most often understood as a projection of the exiled parts of ourselves. So what is not owned by us, if I can't see my selfishness, if I can't see my immaturity, my short-sightedness, my cruelty, whatever it might be, I will deny that in myself, and I will find places in the world, people in the world, to project that onto. So the task of being a parent is to mature. I love the quote by the great artist, Georgia O'Keeffe, where she says, "I've settled the matter for myself. Therefore, criticism and praise go down the same drain." In other words, because I've come to terms with myself, you get to feel how you feel around me. And if I said something to you last week or yesterday or this morning that upset you, and I've made peace with myself, I will have the capacity to allow you to be upset with me, to allow you to be angry, to allow you to accuse me of failing, of dropping the ball, of coming up short. That is the work. And I'm not there yet, not completely, right? I'm much farther along on that journey than I was a year ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, for sure. But that is my lifelong journey. I really do think of it as a father and a therapist and a teacher, that if I can do my work, then I can become this person. I was going to use something a little bit more woo-woo, like this vessel. I can become this person to take in the pain of others, the hurt and the fear of others, to metabolize it, and to reflect back out understanding and love and compassion. And by doing that, I make the world a better place. That's my goal. But I want to be clear. I come up short of this every day, all the time. I have to go back to therapy and confess that I wasn't able to do it, that I lashed out at somebody, that I punished somebody, that I had a bad session, that I couldn't show compassion toward my wife or toward my children, that I became more obsessed with getting it right than with connection. So that's the work. The work is to love yourself. And when you love yourself, you become this conduit where you alchemize the fear, the anger, the hurt, the pain of the world through your body, and you send back out love. I've said this before. The Buddha, before he became the Buddha, left his family. Take that in for a second. The one that we associate with compassion, with love, with enlightenment. The first step was to take care of himself at the cost of others. Somebody asked me recently, how do you know if you're doing the right thing or you're just being selfish? And the answer is, you don't. Nobody else does, that's for sure. Because in order to become a better spouse, a better parent, a better friend, a better sibling, in order to become that, you've got to deal with yourself. You've got to face yourself. You essentially have to risk becoming the very thing that you were told that you ought not to be. But the beautiful thing that happens with this kind of shadow work, with this depth psychology, this dive into ourselves, this spiritual journey inside of us, the wonderful thing that comes out of it is you have more peace. You have more love. You have more capacity. So much of when I think about parents, for example, making the decision to send their child to treatment, or you could think of it as a spouse, drawing a line in the sand with their spouse and saying, if you don't get help for your drinking, I can't stay in this marriage. You could think of any significant boundary like that. You could even think of parenting in the small decisions you make to ground your child, to take away their phone. Doesn't matter what the context is, what the situation is, what the event is. There's so much paradox in this. I looked up dialectic and paradox because those were the words that I was battling with today to talk about this. And I asked, what were the similarities and the crossovers between dialectic, which if you're familiar with dialectical behavioral therapy, this is that. This is where that word is. Both dialectics and paradoxes discuss this tension between seemingly opposites. Both paradox and dialectic involve a coexistence or confrontation of opposites, truths that seem incompatible, contradictory, or mutually exclusive at first glance. A very famous dialectic that is presented in dialectical behavioral therapy is, at any given moment, I'm doing the best that I can and I can do better. And the dialectic that I want to talk about today is, I spend so much of my energy teaching people to listen, to show compassion, especially toward children, to be the bigger person, the adult in the room. But at the same time, I don't want parents to be held hostage by their children's feelings. I want you to listen, to be sensitive, to understand, to offer empathy, resonance, attunement, all of that. But I don't want you to be held hostage and driven by their feelings, seemingly at every step trying to make them feel better and happier. And that might seem like opposites, but that's what I'm talking about. Dialectics and paradox talk about this transcendence of binary thinking. Each of those ideas resists simple either or logic and invites deeper reflection. They often lead to insight by containing rather than resolving tension. Used in philosophy, theology, and psychology, Jung, Hegel, Kierkegaard, Zen Buddhism, all traffic in both of these ideas, seeing paradox and dialectic as roads to deeper wisdom. Sometimes in Buddhism, it's called the middle path. I often say in Western psychologies and Western religions and mythologies, dialectics isn't something that we talk about as much. In Eastern religions, it is more often talked about. This idea that love and grief are the other side of the same coin. That fear and love are the other side of the same coin. That we can be angry at our parents and also at the same time love them and be grateful. Just that idea right there. I can love you and be grateful for you, and I can still be angry and carry resentment for you at the same time. I remember when my father passed away in 2020. He died of COVID, April 15th, 2020, right when the pandemic was heating up. And I remember sharing it with some friends, and they had gone through the loss of their father, and so of course they were projecting onto me their experience. And I was assuring them, I said, my father and I weren't close. We hadn't really had a close relationship since he left when I was a child. Haven't really talked for the most part in 10 years prior to his passing. I talked to him the week of his passing. And then my friend said to me, he said, yeah, but I'm sure you probably feel guilty because you don't feel sad. And I said, I don't feel that either. I remember my brother, my older brother, wanted me to go out and visit my father. We couldn't really see him because at that time they weren't allowing people into the hospital. We didn't know a lot about COVID, and everything was very, very careful. And it was deadly. And I said to my brother, I don't think I need to go out there. I don't think that's something I need to do for myself. And he said very humbly, very lovingly, he said, I guess I'm just afraid that you're going to regret it. And I said, I appreciate your concern, but I think I know myself well enough to know what I need, what I want in this situation, and I'm at peace with it. And I ended up being the last person in our family to talk to my father. I talked to him a couple of times before he passed away and found my peace with him in that way. But this idea that it's all one thing, think about the contrast of dialectics and paradoxes. The contrast is the binary. It is what we call in psychology borderline functioning. All or nothing, us or them. You either love me or you hate me. You're for me or you're against me. Right? The human psyche reduces things to these binary, these pairs of opposites, because it's simpler. If I can reduce the world into good and bad, right and wrong, us versus them, it makes it very easy for me to manage. But the uncertainty, the complexity, the nuance that comes with paradox and dialectics challenges my psyche. In fact, in a large extent, in a large way, the ability to tolerate and embrace paradox and dialectics is an indication of one's mental health. Another reason why I don't really traffic in politics, because it's so drenched in this binary, this borderline functioning. And why is it drenched in this borderline functioning? Because the world is full of fear. But I love to meditate on the idea and to share with people a quote that I came across some time ago that said, all the mystics agree on this one thing. The thing that all the mystics agree on is that all is well. All is well. Doesn't mean that there's no pain, there's no grief, there's no loss, there's no hurt. But the situation is not dire. You see, fear is the poison. It can serve us, it can keep us safe. But if we become stuck in it, or it becomes stuck in us, we have to make the world much more simple than dialectics and paradox, than the middle path invites us to see the world through. Paradox asks us, can you sit with this? Dialectic is a process of moving through it. Can you move through this? In psychological work, paradox is often where the client arrives. For example, I hate my mother, but I also love her. Holding those pairs of opposites is growth. Dialectic is the therapeutic process, helping the client oscillate between poles until something new is born. Something richer, something deeper, something more profound, something more transcendent. You see, the use of poetry, the use of analogies, of allegories, of parables, is because we don't have words that quite capture this, right? Our language leads us to this idea of opposites, of the binary. Whereas metaphor allegories, stories can teach us. I was just watching a story this week, even though I say this all the time, I saw it again. Saw the new Superman out with my family. And one thing that they did in this particular version of Superman, as well as any that I've ever seen, is they made him human. Because one of the lessons of our myths, of our stories, is that the hero is not all bad and the villain is, the hero is not all good and the villain is not all bad. So yes, we go to Superman because it's fun, because it's a distraction. But the stories that remain, the stories that we repeat generation after generation, civilization after civilization even, are the stories that resonate with the deepest of human experiences. So let's talk about some of the dialectics and paradoxes. One paradox that I often talk about and have alluded to already is this paradox of listening to your child and still holding to your own truth, taking care of yourself. The most common mistake that I hear people make as they interpret my work, what I write and what I teach, is that they hear that they have to listen to their child forever, ad nauseum, no matter what. That task cements them as a good parent. But remember, if the goal is not to be good, the goal is rather to be human, then the real thing I'm teaching, the real thing I'm inviting is you listen to your child as much as you can. And if you can't, or to the extent that you can't, you go fill your cup somewhere else. Then you come back to the child and you say, I have more now than I did yesterday or this morning or an hour ago or last year. I can listen again. Until you're drained again, and then you take a timeout. You meditate. You take a walk. You watch your favorite television show. You play a game on your smartphone to escape, to rest your nervous system, and then you come back. See, the spiritual work of psychology is not about being so good and so capable that you do everything right and perfect. The spiritual work is looking at yourself honestly, getting rid of the shame and the guilt and the self-criticism and judgment. But we've been taught to fear that if we just accept ourselves, that we'll end up being the worst kind of human being there is. But the fact of the matter, just the opposite is true. People who become who they are the most, in fact, they are really the only ones capable of love. Because otherwise, if you're doing a thing in parenting or in marriage or in friendship, if you're doing it to be good, you're serving your ego. That's why it doesn't make sense to think about some of the teachings that we've interpreted over the centuries as commandments. Love thy neighbor as thyself. That doesn't make sense. I've never been able to generate love out of nothing. It has to come from somewhere. That energy, that act of loving has to come from somewhere. And if I just behave in such a way that it looks loving, the person will feel that. And it really will be in service of me. And when you don't feel loved, when you don't appreciate my love, when you don't absorb my love, I'm going to get mad at you. Because you're getting in the way of the project, which is for me to demonstrate my goodness. How wonderful I am as a friend or whatever the role is. The paradox of caring about your child, how your child feels while not allowing it to dictate your decision making. That's the hardest thing. That's the hardest thing. You can only do what you can do. And if you show up, I'm going to say this very clearly. If you show up to a conversation, to a situation, to a relationship because you should, not because you can, but because you should, you will end up hurting them or you. We show up when we can, because that's the truth. I listen to my wife's frustration when I can. But of course, because of my background, my history, my childhood, like yours, I want to be good. So I to be a good husband, I've got to listen to my wife. I've got to listen to my children. And I'm prone to do that, tempted to do that, even when I'm depleted. So what happens? I listen, I try to white knuckle my way through it, and then I end up rebutting what they have to say. I end up with the defense. I end up with some kind of counter criticism, counter attack. And of course, I blame the wife and the child. I find a way to make them the bad one. So we learn, I want you to listen to your children when you can. And when you can't, I want you to go get your cup filled. But I want you to listen. And when you can't, I want you to not. I want you to ask for time, for space, for a pause. But the reason that you won't be able to do that is because you'll feel guilty. And very often they will embody that guilting message by telling you don't care. You know, the old line in my family is, well, you listen to your clients all day, no matter what they have to say. You listen compassionately and patiently to them, but then at the end of the day, you don't have time for your children or for your wife, right? That's the shame. But the great mystery of love is that love is a giving thing, not a taking thing. And you can only give what you have. The great mystery is that love is built on healthy self-care. Patience is built on self-care. Compassion is built on self-care. And self-care is something that we were at times shamed about. If I finish this broadcast and I go out to talk to my wife and I'm depleted because this is the end of my workday, right? These broadcasts take energy from me. So I finish this up, I walk into the room, and my wife has something to vent about. It could be about me or about life, about the children. It could be about anything. And if I say to her, I don't have time, I need to take a break, maybe later, maybe tomorrow, maybe in an hour, maybe in 15 minutes, whatever it is, see, I'm failing. And if she looks at me with frustration and anger, that triggers that wound in me that I've got to be good. So I'll say things to her like, what kind of person would ask a spouse after a long day with no break, would dump their needs on them? What kind of person would demand that I take care of you? You see, we go into that conversation where I'm either a failure as a husband or she's a failure as a wife. But really, it's just about our own individual insecurities, our own individual needs. So I'm just learning to be able to drop the ball. I'm learning to be able to fail. I'm learning to come up short. That's the great paradox. The greatest paradox along this line is what the great teacher, the Buddhist teacher Alan Watts said. He says, once you realize there's nothing on the dark side to be afraid of, that is, all the things that you've been taught were evil and bad, all the things you should not be. Once you realize that there's nothing on the dark side to be afraid of, he said, nothing is left but love. The great teachers that I admire throughout history don't talk about how great they are ever. They talk about what idiots they are all the time. Not because of shame, but because of, ironically, paradoxically, confidence. There's a paradox in parenting that where the child will want a relationship with you when, will the child want a relationship with you when the money's gone, when they don't need your money, when they don't need whatever leverage you have over them? Will they still want to have a relationship with you? Or will they come to you out of obligation, out of some kind of duty? To be a good child, by the way. To take care of your ego. I don't want my children to come home for the holidays because of guilt and obligation and duty, not even a little bit. I want them to come home because they want to come home. I want them to come home because being with me feels good to them. safe, welcoming. And I would rather not that they come home out of duty or responsibility or because it's the right thing to do, is because that's what they've been told that families do or children do. I'd rather them not do that if it hurts them. I don't want my children showing up to relationships and situations out of this moral obligation. I want them to show up to relationships that provide them a sense of meaning, connection, resonance, that make them feel alive, seen. So after your children, I ask parents, after the money is gone, after the leverage is gone, will your child want to be around you? And I get questions very similar to the questions about if my child will forgive me, if they will hold on to this resentment. I get the question all the time, what if my child abandons me? And I often answer that by saying, and there's truth to this, children don't really abandon parents because children aren't tasked with raising parents. Abandonment is something that parents can do to children, but not the other way around. When I stopped talking to my father, I didn't abandon my father. I took care of myself. I attended to what I needed. So the paradox is that, yeah, it's not like that. But, however, and, as we like to say in dialectical behavioral therapy, and it's a curious question. You know, I don't really get it when people get mad at friends being bad friends. You know, you don't call anymore. You don't, you know, you're a bad sister. You're a bad. My thought is, I watched this between two people recently where a sibling said to another sibling, I've been a bad sibling. I need to call more. And I thought, I think you're calling as much as you want to. And in fact, I think they're calling you as much as they want to. You know that new book that's become popular recently? The book called Let Them? I think it's by Mel Robbins. That's this. Let them. If people don't love you, let them not love you. If people are resentful, let them be resentful. If people are angry, let them be angry. That doesn't mean, and this is back to that mistake that people make, that you subject yourself to any kind of abuse, any kind of treatment, that you have to sit there out of some duty to the teachings that I'm teaching. You have some responsibility to sit there and take it. You take it as long as you can. And then when you can't, you take your time. In essence, you fail. And you come to terms with that, because in order to love, you have to learn how to fail. In order to love, you have to accept your humanity. If you cling tightly to the idea of being good, you will hurt everybody that you care about. If they are angry and resentful, let them be. You know, I asked a parent about this recently, and she told me, your children will resent you one way or the other. So accept it. In a sense, the child needs you to be the object of their projections. Right? That's what makes you bigger, psychologically, spiritually. Right? I listen to my children in my good moments, my healthy moments, my capable moments. I listen to my children's resentment with acceptance, understanding. You see, I've sorted out my stuff with my therapist. I've sorted out my stuff in my own meditation, my own spiritual journey. So what they think about me is not about me necessarily. That's another thing, is when you accept your horrible, rotten self, you can see other people. Because you don't need them to think or feel or perceive or decide or judge anything anyway. You just see them. So they're going to resent you. That's part of the task. That's part of being a child. I remember studying this 35 years ago during my undergraduate. They were discussing child daycare and saying one of the disadvantages, and there are advantages to daycare, But one of the disadvantages for parents working outside of the home and children going to daycare during the day and then coming home is that at the end of the day, the parent is depleted. And quality time, this is important. Quality time for the developing child means they have to say no, they have to rebel, they have to individuate. Now, if they're in daycare with a bunch of children and some adults, some caring adults, compliance and cooperation is overvalued in that setting. So when they come home, they might need to push against you, to be a little bit bratty, pissy, upset. But because you've had a long day at work and you're thinking quality time is warm and cuddling and having fun and having great conversations, your idea of quality time and their idea of quality time at an unconscious level, of course, because this is not conscious, are diametrically opposed. So the disadvantage of working and having your child going to childcare is that they need somewhere to individuate, somewhere to rebel, somewhere to say no. That's an important developmental task. I think in a lot of ways, what this calls for is grieving. It calls for grief work. That's what this work calls for. You see, my younger version of me, from 5 years ago, from 10 years ago, from 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, doesn't know what this version of me today knows. And I expect that to repeat itself in the future. I don't know everything. I'm not there. More to learn. And so in some ways, I look back at making choices, whether it was sending my child to treatment, which I sent 2 of them, or whether it was the way that I dealt with smartphones, the way that I dealt with friends, with girlfriends, boyfriends, with grades, with all of it. I have more wisdom and I have more capacity today. I have a bigger vision today than I did when I was in my 20s and 30s. I'm 57 now. And so I grieve for that, along with my children. That the version of me that parented my 32-year-old son when he was a teenager, it's sad to think about. And I think about that often. So I think in a lot of ways, this task of allowing our children to resent us calls for us to do our grief work, to feel our way through it. Some years ago, a very common intervention in the treatment world was the initial letter that parents were sending for their children to read in therapy. We called it the impact letter. In fact, I think some programs still may do this. I was always working around it, trying to work around it, trying to apologize for it. You see, it's not the child's job to take care of the parent. So if the letter is, here's what you did and how it impacted me, that fundamentally, structurally posits the child as the caregiver of the parent. And that's not what it's about. Raising healthy children is exhausting, right? It's impossible to raise children. So I just thought the impact letter wasn't right. Didn't make sense. I don't want the child, more than anything, I don't want your children getting off drugs and stopping their dangerous behavior so that you can sleep at night. I really don't. I want them getting healthier because that's the reward of a well-lived life. So the early letters for years that I kind of adopted from the programs that I came from was this impact letter. Here's a list of what you did and how it impacted me. That was the essence, the bones of the letter. Excuse me. But I realized that I got to change this. So I came up with something called the hopes and intentions letter. And I really tried to think, what really is every parent at the core? If their highest self could speak, what are they saying? And what I came up with was this. Here's what's going on with you that concerns me, that worries me. I don't know what to do. I'm over my head. I don't know how to help you. I'm overmatched. So I'm sending you to program X in order to get the help that you need. You don't have to like it. You don't have to be grateful for it. You don't even have to agree that it's a good idea. Heck, I don't even know if it's a good idea. I've sat with parents who have wanted to convince the child that of their good intentions, that they did the best they could. And I've said that that's not the child's task. That's not what the developing child needs. They need to push against you. They need to disagree with you. They need to not like it. And it needs to be okay with you. They need to know you're that safe with them. After all of this teaching and working with somebody, I had a parent many years ago write an amends letter to their child to make up for, to repair what the parent said in the impact letter. And this was interesting. This parent did not apologize for sending the child to treatment, but they apologized for many of the things that they said during that time. Things like, I can't sleep at night and I'm embarrassed by your behavior. Basically, how they made the child responsible for the parent's sense of self. And they wrote this beautiful letter, sent it to me as a gift just to share it with me. And I was in tears reading it. It was beautiful. This parent said to me, I shared it with my spouse. And my spouse said, you know, that our daughter is just going to use this against you. And I said, what did you say to your spouse? And she said, she can't. It's literally impossible. Because everything I said in there is true. And she's allowed to feel everything that I suspect that she feels. And I'm not going to move off of my truth. I'm not sorry for sending her away. I'm not sorry for being overmatched. I'm not sorry that I didn't know how to help. I grieve for that. I have empathy for that, how my humanness impacted her. But I'm not apologizing for that. I'm apologizing for the things that I said from a place of being wounded, from a place of being a child, from not being the adult. It's really important to understand that it's not so much what we say and do, it's why we say and do it that matters. If it comes from a place of fear or ego, if it comes from the place of needing to be good, which is ego, it's nearly impossible to get it right in parenting, in relationship. But if we do it from love, it's hard to get it wrong. Wanting or needing forgiveness from your child is the one way to impede it. Forgiveness is your need, not their need. It asks the child to bind the wounds left over from your childhood, to make you feel good about you. Forgiveness is something we can do when we're ready to do it. And it comes on the terms and the timeline of the hurt party. I don't teach anybody to forgive anybody, ever. But they do forgive people as they grow, as they deal with themselves, as they see themselves more clearly, as they transcend. The fact of the matter is, you can't not dent your children. You're worried about them being mad about you sending them to treatment. They have 1,000 reasons to be mad at you. That's just the most substantial, emblematic way. That's the one that stands out, that they can hang their hat on. But you and I, we hurt our children all the time because we're human. We don't want to. We don't like to do it. We're not proud of it. But we do it. We stumble through this stuff. And growing up as an adult, as a parent, means carrying that up for ourselves, not asking them to carry it. Your child will forgive you when she or he grows up, when they get healthy, because that's what healthy, maturing people do. Healthy people forgive their parents for their decisions, for their perceived limitations, for their insecurities, and surely for well-intentioned interventions, at least. In that vein, a young person who matures and gains a more well-rounded and healthy perspective Well, forgive parent or parents for instigating an intervention that they, the parents, believe was vital to their health, well-being, and in some cases, to the survival of the child. But if you need the child to forgive you, they will more likely stay stuck in it. So let them be mad. Let them be resentful. It's nothing to do with you. That's the paradox. Listen, but it's nothing to do with you. And if it is something to do with you, then make an amends and make it better. In many ways, I think they want you to feel the utter hopelessness, the utter powerlessness that they feel and felt. That's why they go on and on. Either that is because they just don't feel that you're listening, that you're hearing, that you've done your work. I wrote, it is possible to look to our past, to our wounds, without falling into a victim's mindset. Looking to our past. It's not a search for blame, but rather a search for understanding and self-compassion. But often, looking to our past, to our parents, the aversion to this might be because we're trying to protect our parents. In other words, we are carrying around our parents' defenses, our parents' egos. Many people are averse to looking at their wounds from childhood, because unconsciously they have to prop their parents up. They've been asked. I think the most common feature of dysfunctional families, the most common feature is that the parents need to be good. And the opposite of being good is just being human. That's another thing that the myths are trying to teach us, just to be human. Alice Miller talked about the capacity of a parent to be there for the child. How does our work, the work that we do, the work that I invite you to do, how does it relate to parenting? She wrote, for a parent can react empathically only to the extent that she has become free of his or her childhood. If she denies the vicissitudes of her early life, she wears invisible chains. What the mother had once failed to find in her own mother, that is, acceptance, love, welcoming. What the mother had once failed to find in her own mother, she was able to find in her child. Somebody at her disposal who could be used as an echo and could be controlled, who was completely centered on her, would never desert her, and offered her full attention and admiration. One of the great gifts of this no contact culture that we see nowadays, with people going no contact with their family, is it evens the playing field of power. The child now says, you have to earn your ticket to my life. And they have that right. I don't want to give up that right to my mother and my father, to my family of origin. And I don't want your children to give up that right either. Alice Miller goes on to say that when we ask our children to care for our feelings and provide our security, the security we needed, should have received in our own childhood, we often require them to suppress or repress parts of themselves to make us feel okay. The parents, she said, have found in their child's false self the confirmation that they were looking for. So the question about forgiveness, the question about resentment, it's not their need. That's your need from childhood that has gone unmet. That is your work. And you'll be best served to work on that in therapy with a therapist. Alice Miller, here's a few quotes from her. She said, what is missing above all is the framework within the child where the child could experience his feelings and emotions. Instead, he develops something the mother needs. She talked in terms of mothers primarily as the functional primary parent. Instead, he develops something the mother needs. And although this certainly saves his life by securing his mother or father's love at the time, it may nevertheless prevent him throughout his life from being himself. The parents have found in their child's false self the confirmation they were looking for, a substitute for their own missing security. A child can never see through the unconscious manipulation. It is like the air he breathes. He knows no other and appears to him to be the only breathable air. And she tells the story when a 6-year-old's mother died, his aunt told him, "You must be brave. Don't cry. Now go to your room and play nicely. I can be sad or happy when anything makes me sad or happy. I don't have to look cheerful for someone else, and I don't have to suppress my distress or anxiety to fit other people's needs. I can be angry and no one will die or get a headache because of it. I can be that way when you hurt me without losing you. Today, I question things that do not make sense." That is the work. The work is to grow up. And the great paradox is, if you send your child to treatment and they get healthier, they will expose your emotional immaturity, your undone work. And that's not to pick on you. I'm talking about me. I've told many stories about the letters, the experiences that I had with my children when they were in treatment. Inevitably, the things that I think about today are not the lessons that they learned, but what I learned about myself from the process. J.D. Gill said, "Of course, the good kid is never the real kid either. The only real kid is the whole kid. Good parts, bad parts, and those in between." And from her book, Seeing in Psychotherapy, she said, "One's parents were limited. It's true. They were flawed, human creatures. They too had limited parents. This is how they became limited. One's parents wounded one. It is likely they were wounded in a similar fashion and perhaps much worse. It is entirely appropriate to be angry at one's parents for how they hurt or neglected you. That's what they did. The wound, however, is mine." By the way, you can't say that to the child. "The wound, however, is mine. I am the one they wounded. And since the wound is mine, it is my issue to deal with, not theirs. And if I don't deal with it, I am the one who will be compromised, not them." It's the same task that they have that you have, which is to grow up. In a lecture on boundaries, I ended with this closing statement. As parents, lastly, we can say we are sorry when we fail. Every parent has limits, and every child will discover the end of those limits. We can say sorry when we fall short of the ideal. And with this, the child learns perhaps the most important lesson of all, what it means to be human. So what are the take-homes? Learn to listen without being held hostage and driven by what they say. Learn to attune. Develop a sense of self so that you can see them as them, not as a mirror reflecting back who you are. As you know yourself, as you go week after week, year after year to psychotherapy, to 12-step meetings, so whatever it is you do, whatever mirror you find, as you do that, you'll be more capable of seeing others. Asking yourself, what will my child think of me when the leverage I have over them is gone, is an important question to ask. Not to be reflexively held hostage by it, but to be curious about and to be thinking about it. The best way that you can show those closest to you that you love them is to go to therapy. The number one complaint that I've received from kids who are chronically angry and resentful at their parents for being sent away is that the parents didn't do their own work. That the parents didn't own up to their part in the cycle, in the system. That their parents didn't want their crap, if you will, to stink. And the child was then left to carry all of it. All of the issues, all of the problems. To become the bad one. In that fundamental way, we have completely failed. In that fundamental way, we have asked the child to raise us, to give us what our parents didn't give us. Most of this process is about learning to grieve. Learn to grieve, learn to forgive yourself. And when you forgive yourself, that doesn't mean that everybody else needs to forgive you. In fact, the more you forgive yourself, the more open and welcoming you will be to other people's resentment towards you, because it's not about you. It'll be like you're watching a movie where they're talking about somebody else. As Carl Jung said, the unlived life of the parent is the greatest burden for a child to bear. So if you want to love your children, to love everybody that you care about and care for, go do your work. Go carry your shadow, the unconscious parts of yourselves that you've neglected and avoided up to this point. Take those back. This is my closing statement. I said this a couple of years ago. You were wounded, more than some and less than others, but you were hurt. And the way you protect that pain hurts others, most pointedly your children. Work on yourself and discover that your fear, your hurt, and your anger are yours. Take those feelings back so your children don't have to carry them. This is the greatest love that you can give, and it will multiply. Your children will bring even greater healing to their children. And in this very simple way, your love multiplies throughout eternity. This is as clear as I can state it. If we don't take on the responsibility for our fear, it's our fear. It's in our bodies. If we don't grapple with and take responsibility and look at it and deal with it, our children and our partners will be asked to carry those wounds for us. That's our responsibility. That's how we show the people that we love them. All right, folks. My 2 books, like I said, Journey of the Heroic Parent, Audacity Be You, are available on Amazon and Audible. If you want to work with me in 2025, at Finding You, July 23rd is the last available offering that I will be doing. Then we have I messed that up. If you want to work with me at Finding You, August 13th is that offering. That's the last one I'll be doing this year. September 3rd, October 1st, November 5th, December 3rd. Go to our website. If you want a coach or a therapist who works in this model, go to our website or email us at info@findingyouprograms.com. That's also the place to go for private intensives, for suggestions, for questions. I'm going to be hosting a 5-day workshop at the beautiful Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York this fall, October 12th through 17th. It's around $500 for a 5-day program. Absolutely wonderful. My daughter will be right by my side the entire time. Go to the Omega website at eomega.org. That's eomega.org. Click on the workshops and then the Audacity to Be You. My next broadcast will be a week from today. I'm going to be going over the book Illusions by Richard Bach. I love that book. I was given it as a teenager when I was a struggling teen, and it's been something that has stayed with me all of these years. Illusions by Richard Bach. He also wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull, if you recognize the name. That'll be next Tuesday, July 29th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. I look forward to that. Thanks for joining me. And as always, I hope this is a helpful point of contact for you. For and on behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you, thank you for showing up. Because you looking at you, having the courage to look inside of yourself, to see your part of all of this, is the greatest way to show love to the people around you. Have a great evening, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.